Hello and welcome to My Retro Watches, and my name is Mike, and if you're new to the channel, thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoy this video, and if you do, please hit the subscribe button and the bell button next to it. That way you'll be alerted to any of my new content. So what's this video about? This episode is about what has stopped this quartz watch. So this is a quartz watch. It's an Omega and it's a 1425, or that's what it says on the movement at the back. And it was sent to me by a guy called Pete Hurst, who's a friend of mine and also a member of the group and a fellow subscriber to the channel. And he said, I want to get this watch running, but it's not working. Can you have a look at it? So of course I obliged. I haven't done that many analog watches before, mainly digitals and mechanical automatic watches. However, the principles are pretty much the same, and I'm suspecting on this particular watch that it's a battery acid that's leaked, got onto the components, maybe it's onto the board, or maybe it's into the mechanics of the watch, and hopefully we can clean that off, test it, and at the end of the video get this watch running for Pete. So the plan of action is to go onto the bench. I'll show you a bit close up. We'll go onto the microscope as well, and we'll have a look a bit closer at the movement inside and see if we can spot anything obvious. So stay tuned. We're going to go to the bench now and crack on with the video. Thank you. Okay, so this is the watch on the bench that we're going to be working on and see if we can get it going. As you can see, it's an Omega Seamaster, and it's quite an interesting looking thing, pretty dressy. And I've already taken the case back off because it's a snapback, so it needs a pressure fit to put it back on. And this is what we're confronted with. So from the quartz watches I've seen so far, this certainly looks a lot better, but then sure, it should do. It's an Omega, so it should be better quality. So you can see lots of nice finish there. So all I've done is taken the case back off. I've tried a battery, of course. It's the most obvious thing to do, and of course it doesn't work. So let's have a closer look, and I'll put it on the microscope and we'll investigate it from there. Right, okay, so we have a screw here and a screw here. Don't turn this thing. That is for the timing of the watch, so you don't really want to be turning that at this stage. So I'll unscrew these two and this cover here for the coil and remove those and see what lies beneath. And as always, make sure you've got a container or something like this that you can put your screws in so that you don't lose them. These things are very, very difficult to find again if they fall on the floor, and if you're working in carpet, then good luck, because finding things in carpet is even more challenging. Okay, I was hoping that that was just going to lever off. It looks like it wants to. Okay, let's take the other bit off first. You never want to force a watch part. Everything should come away fairly easy. Sometimes things are a little bit stuck, but that's, you know, expected. But certainly not forcing, because you can bend a part or you can damage it. Okay, so we'll remove this cover first, and already, I don't know if you can see that, see all that acid there. So again, this is wet, and that's not a good sign at all, which will mean that the board is probably covered in it as well, but you can start seeing the circuit there. It does look pretty clean from the top, which is heartening. However, I now want to just try and release the other cover, and of course what I haven't failed to notice, which is right in front of me, is this big screw here, and no doubt that is part of this cover, and of course it is, as you can see, and away with that comes the board as well. So in actual fact the board doesn't look too bad. We'll put that under the scope in just a moment, and let's have a quick look inside. The insides look like they've fared a lot worse, so that acid seems to have got into all of that mechanics there. But again, let's just put this on the scope and have another look. So we're going to remove the watch from the case, and to remove the stem I need to push on this button here and that will come out. And we then have these little clamps on either side. That one is already loose. And we'll just remove those. Screw stuck to the screwdriver, probably covered in acid. Okay, and then there'll be a seal, as we can see, or a gasket. It's gone quite hard. And now if I turn that over, it just drops out. Now we can see the dial, and there doesn't look to be too much damage on the dial, which is very fortunate because that's the last thing you want to happen. Now it's out, I now want to replace the crown, excuse me, which I'm trying to do off camera without realizing. And then I can bring these hands as close as I can together in preparation to remove them. And I've just got my hand tool. Of which this last one is a little bit more tricky, and too tricky. Let's see if I can get the lever. Right, just bear with me. Okay, sorry about that. I just wanted to remove the hand off camera a bit closer to my eyes. Obviously it's not my watch, so I don't want to cause any damage unnecessarily. Now all I want to do is remove this dial. So if we turn it over, we have I don't know what you'd call these, they're like little cams, these things, and all I want to try and do is move that in that direction, and similarly with the other one. And now the dial will come off, and now we can work on this side. Okay, now we're back on the microscope because we've got a little circlip that holds the day wheel on, and it took me a while to actually work out that that's what it was, and looks like someone else has tried to hack it as well because there's lots of scratches around it. Now it's a bit of trepidation, you can just see it a bit there, and there's another bit at the top here. Hopefully you can get that. Just trying to position it right, and I've got to put some Rodico, which I've got here, some old Rodico. I'm going to try and put it right at the back And once that is in position, that hopefully will prevent anything from pinging away, because I then need to push from either side of this circlip, and I'm trying to do that whilst filming for you guys, because I'm trying to use the other eyepiece here. It's quite a critical part, so if you just excuse me, hopefully this will come off. With these sort of things, it's just a case of trying to get the right angle, and there we go. So the Rodico's caught it, and I'm just trying to show it you, and you can see it there, all quite blurry. Excuse the dirtiness of the Rodico as well. It's not normally like that for me. So we'll put that part somewhere safe, somewhere very safe, and then we can now remove this day wheel hopefully and get to the mechanics under there. I see, right, okay, so the day wheel itself lifts off like so. There we go. And what does that reveal underneath? See if anything's affected by the acid. And oh, okay, so immediately we've got a rogue part. That's going to be interesting for me later on, because I don't know where this part goes. Perhaps it sits in that hole there. I'll have to do some research. Oh, okay, that doesn't look very good either. There's this, whatever this is, looks to be broken, and it's just pinged somewhere also. So there. So I'm hoping that that is not being caused by me. I was pretty gentle taking that disc off, in fairness. And again, I'm a bit of a loss. I'm trying to see where that may have come from. Perhaps it's part of that mechanism there. Doesn't look like anything may have snapped off that. So, looks like if you're a member of my Facebook group, you'll be seeing this post before you see the video as to the part placement for these. However, the rest of the mechanics in here don't look too bad. The corrosion hasn't got through from the battery acid too much. There's some there. And the idea I had really was, rather than strip the entire watch down and go to the whole length of trying to do all that and then rebuild it, was to remove anything with paint on, i.e. the date disc, and then put the whole thing, all the metal parts, in my ultrasonic in some IPA alcohol, and run a cycle in there, because the IPA alcohol cleans out the acid very well, and perhaps we can cheat a little bit by doing that and then rebuilding and seeing if it's actually going to work or not, because at the moment I don't know. It could be the circuit board, it could be a bit of mechanics. I'm thinking it's a bit of mechanics, and therefore if I wash it and it still doesn't work when I put the circuit board back in, then I haven't spent hours trying to rebuild this thing. So that will be the next plan, is to just get the day ring off here then, and to wash it in the ultrasonic. Okay, to get the date wheel off, I've had to already remove two small components that are in here, and the last one is just to unscrew this or loosen it, and the date wheel should, he says, should come off. So I'm just going to loosen that one tightly. I've given it a good examination first, and yes, there we are. So the date wheel is off, and what you can see there is all the keyless works that I've zoomed in on. And at the moment I'm going to kind of leave those alone. They can be pretty fiddly to refit, certainly on a watch like this that I've not done before. So I'm just going to tighten that screw back up and remove then the hour wheel, which is here, because that's going to fall off anyway. The reduction wheel, and this would be the date wheel, date driving wheel. So this is what changes the date at 12 o'clock. So I'll remove that as well, and the cannon pinion should be pretty sturdy. It's a bit loose, but it should be okay. It's going to be held in by that. So at this stage, I'll just tighten that one up. So at this stage, apart from removing the crown, I'm going to put it in the ultrasonic in some IPA alcohol. And I'm just going to use a little jam jar to do that and to submerge the whole thing. I'm not going to put the board in there, just a few parts that have taken off, and we'll see how much that cleans it off to start with. And then we'll rebuild, and if it works, great. That means I can disassemble and oil the places that need to be oiled. If it doesn't work, then I need to be looking at the circuit board a bit closer or trying to source some components. So the next part you'll see is it after it's been cleaned. Right, well, while all the other parts are being cleaned, I just thought we would try and clean up this battery contact just a little bit. I've got to be very careful. Don't really want to touch that coil if I can help it, and I don't really want to touch the board too much. So what I'm going to use is a bit of IPA alcohol and a fibre brush, and literally just brush away on there. And as almost predicted, a lot of the gold is coming off, if it is gold, because it could still be dried battery acid. But that's how I would be cleaning that, and then likewise we can clean the other side exactly the same way. And that's how I would clean that, basically. So now, like I say, I'm going to, once the parts are cleaned, I'll put them on the microscope. You can have a look at how that's come out, and then I'll rebuild the watch and we'll see if it's going to run. Okay, after a long bath in alcohol, not much really happened, to be fair. The acid corrosion or covering still wouldn't really budge, and I had no choice but to remove the train wheel bridge here, because I've always thought the problem with this watch might be in these wheels anyway. And sure enough, you can see still that they are badly stained. They should be quite nice shiny gold, and there's still a lot of hardened sort of acid where it's crystallized. So I'm going to have to strip all of that out now and clean it again, and I'll probably put it all in the watch cleaning machine and see if that makes any difference at all, and whether we can move some of these stubborn stains, or whether I've got to find a different type of chemical. So the next bit you'll see, hopefully, is it all nice and clean again. Okay, now it's the train wheels back in position. They've been cleaned as best I can, given the tarnish that's on them. And we just now need to fit the step rotor and put the train wheel bridge back on, and we should be good with the hard part, really. These are always the hard parts of these watches, because these gears are so small. So here we are 8 weeks later, and a lot has happened in that time. Basically, for those who don't know, who are not subscribed perhaps, my workshop here got flooded with sewage, and it was a complete write-off. Lots of things got damaged, and it took a long time to get it cleaned up and get the insurance involved. So what you can see, of course, is a new bench set up, and everything looking a little bit different to what it did just a few moments ago in this particular video. So I eventually got round to trying to look at this Omega again, just last week to be precise, and I rebuilt it all where I left off, and I put the module back in, or the circuit back in, put a battery in, and it didn't work. So I was a bit gutted, but then I put it back on the microscope and started to look at the board itself, presuming that it could be the electronics itself, and I found what I suspected were little breaks in the coil. So I'll just put some pictures overlaying as I'm talking now, and what you'll be able to see is some areas that I thought might be a break. It was quite difficult to tell under even the microscope at quite high power for certain, but it looks like perhaps when the case back's been pried off on other occasions that perhaps a knife has slipped or something's happened. So I have got a fix for this, and it's a bit of a 50-50 fix. It's worked for me sometimes and sometimes it hasn't, and that's just to use some conductive paint. So I bought some conductive paint, and I just use a bit of tissue paper rolled up into a little point, and under the microscope I dab on the paint where I think the break is. And again, I can sort of show you some pictures of the my artwork, should we say, of painting that on. So you let that dry. I let it dry over a couple of days, and then I put the circuit back in, and it still didn't work. So again, bit defeated, but what should I do? So I turned to the Facebook group, and I went on there and I asked if anybody could help or anybody had any suggestions, and what I was told straight away was the actual quartz module in this Omega is an ETA module. It's a 955122, I think, and they're readily available to buy from either eBay or places like Cousins. So of course I contacted Pete, said, do you want to buy one? He agreed, so we bought a new module which turned up, and it looks exactly the same. Pretty much the circuitry looks slightly different, but it's all the same size. So what we're going to do now is we'll cut to the bench pretty shortly, and I will take the new circuit and I'll put it into the old watch itself, screw it down, put a battery in, and see if that will actually tick, because if it does, then at least I know that I've got the train wheels back in, and I either fixed those or there was nothing wrong with them to start with, which we'd never know because of course I've cleaned it. But just for my own curiosity, and perhaps you might be slightly curious now we've got to this stage. If that ticks, great. If it doesn't, well, never mind. I'll then just have to rebuild the watch using the new movement itself, put the dial on, put the hands on, test that the day and the date settings work, and then we can case it and the job is done. So stick with it if you want to. We're going to go to the bench now, and we'll have a look at the new module and put it into the old watch itself. So here we are on the bench looking at the old movement, and as you can see, or maybe you can't, I put the second hand on, and that was a way for me to easily tell whether it was going to be running. So what we're going to do is flip it over. It's still got the battery installed, clearly it isn't working, and again you can just see what I did there to the coil. So at the moment I'll just pop the battery out. This is the new movement. I'll just take that out. Now what I've done is I wanted to make sure it fitted, so the only difference really is this Omega cover. So I wanted to be sure that that was going to fit onto the new one. So of course it still looks like the original. So I'll have to remove that to get to the circuit board and take it out to then put on there. So at the moment I'll just cut off camera, I'll take the circuit boards apart, and then we can see what happens. Okay, now we've got the old movement, and we'll drop the new module in carefully. And then all we've got to do is screw it in and test it. So we'll just put the 4 screws in. I don't need the coil cover necessarily, just for the test. Could do without a lot of the slips on the screwdriver though. You always want to be obviously very careful around the coil. There's one slip the wrong way on that and that's £30 going to be completely wasted. And one more screw. Okay, so it is now going to be the moment of truth. If I can get hold of the battery, here we go. And as you can see, that is ticking. So we've managed to get the train gears all back into position right, along with all the hacking lever for when you pull the crown, which on these was really fiddly. So okay, that's answered the question for me, that I've at least fixed that bit. What I'll do now, of course, is I'll take the board back out, I'll put it into the new one, so the next time you see me, that part will be done, and we'll just go for the putting the dial and the hands on and putting it back in the case. Right, now the circuit is back into the new watch movement, and I did quickly test it with a battery to make sure it was running, and it was, and then I went to screw on the cover plate and it actually stopped the watch. And I did this numerous occasions to be doubly sure that I wasn't doing anything wrong, and it turns out that the board is a slightly different layout. I'm just going to bring in the old board. Now I'd noticed this originally. Let's hold it in the right sort of position so you can kind of see. So there are similarities, but the circuitry is a lot different in the traces, and also the quartz setup. So the quartz setup on the new one, the soldering is on the top, whereas on the bottom on the old one. So I sort of deduced that obviously this cover plate must be creating a short somewhere, and therefore making the watch stop. And it took me a while to figure out what to do with that, because obviously we need to put the cover plate on to make it complete. So I ended up trying a little experiment, and I had to let it dry overnight, but what I did was I painted the underside with some clear coat, which is just some stuff that I actually use for when I do some looming. So it's just this basic stuff here, and I put on 2 or 3 layers, let it dry overnight, and this morning when I put that on and then put the battery back in, lo and behold, it worked. So bit of a cheat really. Clearly, as much as the forum said that this is the correct module for this particular watch, and perhaps it is, there may be 20 years or something different like that in the difference of the watch and this new one. So improvements have been made, or design changes have been had, so I'll never get to the bottom of that. But quite clearly it's not quite the same, but at least the cover will fit and it will still look as good as it was when it came out of the factory. And the main thing is, of course, it'll be working, and if a watch works, then the job is done. So I'm going to put the cover plate on, and we'll turn it over, and then you can see me put the dial on. We'll set the time and get it going. Right, we're now just going to put the dial on, and I have the dial right here, and it has a little ring that goes between the feet, which we just place on, and then we are going to place the dial. I'm just going to take the movement out and hold it, and then we'll place it like so, flip it over, and hopefully we're not going to get dazzled by the lighting, because all I've got to do is push these little arms back in to position, and they grip the dial feet. Like so. Just making sure that it's flush with the case, or else it won't go in the watch itself. There we are. So the dial is now back on, and normally I would then just see if there's any dust anywhere and use my Rodico. However, at the moment I can't see any, but I will look closely in a bit. So now we just need to put the hands back on, and I'm going to put the hands back on without the battery in, because that way it can be a little bit more accurate on the placement. So I'll just get the hands together and show you how we put those on. Right, to fix the hands correctly, we need a pair of decent tweezers, and we need a hand pushing tool, which is just one of these. Got a little hole in the end of it, and you need to set the day date. So what we need to do is wind this on. Excuse me, I'm knocking the camera. Need to pull the crown right out, and we'll wind on. And now what I found on this particular watch is it doesn't move. So for instance, the 11 is not going to move to 12 very slowly like it does on some Seikos. This thing jumps almost instantaneously. So you've got to be a little bit careful with your turning, because if you turn too fast, then obviously when it jumps you could be 15 minutes, 20 minutes out when it comes to the date changing at 12. So, you know, small, slow and steady is going to win this race. There, you see, didn't give us any warning particularly. So I'm just going to push the crown in so I don't knock it by accident. And of course, because the battery's not in, it's certainly going to help with the setting. So first on is the hour hand, and we just want to put that on and line it up as best we can with 12. And once you're happy, use your hand pressing tool to press it on. I like to sometimes take it off as well, and just be doubly sure. There, it's gone on. And then you just want to look at it from different angles to see if it looks parallel and in a straight line. And I'm reasonably happy with that. So now we just repeat the same process for the minute hand. I've done lots and lots of hands in my short time, and they still can catch you out from time to time. It doesn't help when you've got a camera in the way as well, but I like to say that all the time. You guys probably thinking, oh, it's using it as an excuse now. So this second hand has been particularly annoying. Right, I'm happy with that alignment.
And then again, just going to take it off. And then at this point you don't want to make sure that they're not touching. And that they appear to be moving pretty smoothly. And then of course, once you're happy with that, you can put the second hand on. Now you can set the second hand anywhere really, I suppose. I do still like to try and do it at 12 if I can, because also on a quartz where it's ticking, you want it to try and tick on the marks, because if it doesn't tick on the marks, for people like me at least, that would really annoy me. So again, once you're happy with the second hand, just going to push that down gently and then check it. I tend to always be looking from this side angle. And then you want to make sure the hour hand's not going to foul it, which I'm not too sure on. It looks okay. So now it's going to be the moment of truth to put the battery in. So we'll just flip it over. Grab the battery. Turn it over. There we have it. The watch is now ticking, and I would assume that's going to be okay. I'll keep an eye on it for a little while, make sure it keeps going round and doesn't foul the hands. But the next shot you're going to see is I'll have the watch back in its case and we can just look at the final result. Right guys, there we go, the end of this project. So we now have a working Omega Seamaster Quartz movement. Have I enjoyed this video? Well, yes, I did contemplate actually not finishing it after the flood. I kind of just thought I'd try and fix the watch, but you know, I'd recorded most of it, so why not try and make some more content for you guys from that. So it's a bit cobbled together in my eyes. It's not one of my best things, but you know, I had to try and do a quartz watch. I haven't done that many of them before, and this presented all the challenges of the typical battery acid leakage. I was convinced it was in the gearing, and of course it wasn't. It was on the board. So I have learned quite a bit. I hope maybe you guys have too. Don't forget, you know, I'm not a professional, absolutely far from it. I've got a daytime job. This is just my hobby. But the aim really of this channel is to try and inspire more of you into the hobby and picking up the tools for yourself and having a go, because it's really good fun. There's nothing better than taking something broken and fixing it for somebody or for yourself. You know, it is a reward in itself. So I'm going to finish it there, other than saying, you know, thanks very much for watching. Please do leave your comments below, because I do read every single one of them, and I do try and reply to as many as I can. Feedback is always important to me. So don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you've liked this, and you know, there'll be more coming along very soon, including a giveaway very, very soon. I'm going to think about doing a new giveaway. I've got a watch lined up for that. So please stay tuned to the channel for more content very, very soon. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one.